March 18, 2023. President Xi of China is scheduled to visit Moscow on the coming Monday, which would be the 20th. And the objective here is, I guess, to meet with Putin and the Russian government about the relationship. But also on the agenda is this 12-point Chinese peace plan that's been proposed. And of course, the issue there is, of course, how will the Ukrainians respond to this? As I understand it, well, given the relationship between Russia and China and the economic support that Russia needs from China buying their natural resources, and I guess the need that China has from Russia for their natural resources, including, of course, the aid in supporting their nuclear weapons program, as I understand it. Um, they the relationship continues, and of course, this peace plan maybe I don't know. It seems like the how will the Russians accept this, or is this being imposed on Russia? Does Russia want it? Uh, that's an interesting question. Or is this an effort by China to sort of, let's say, take a neutral position? That is, we've been increasingly upset with China because they haven't supported our anti-Russian positions, and of course, China does a lot of trade with the United States and so forth, and they sell a lot to the United States, so they obviously would like to keep that economic relationship going, one would think. So it's an interesting question where that goes here. Um, and of course, a lot of this depends on actually the unknown status of the war. I guess if you follow the media, and if you really don't know, which we don't really know, I mean, we really don't have access to actual intelligence reports or actual real CIA data, sort of the raw data, maybe not what's being told to our politicians, but what the experts actually know inside the organization. Uh, I mean, I've been expressing on many videos what I think the truth is, but other people in the mainstream media, you can say, are saying quite the opposite, as you would notice, right? And of course, what is the real truth? If Russia really is in dire straits, then they would probably be very welcoming to a peace plan that would involve a ceasefire, which would presumably, take the pressure off of them. On the other hand, if they're actually doing as good as I think they are, they might not really want a ceasefire because that would give the Ukrainians a chance to absorb this equipment that's starting to come in from the NATO countries, such as the tanks from Germany and I guess several Spain, Poland, and several other countries are providing them various tanks. And then again, you also have recently now that Poland and like Slovakia is going to offer them a MiG-29 aircraft. So, obviously, if a ceasefire would give Ukraine a chance to strengthen their forces, rebuild their military from losses, and to train for an offensive. So it really kind of depends on the state of the war, I guess, what the likelihood of Russia welcoming such a ceasefire proposal. I think the key thing that's favorable to them is it does not demand that Russia give up territory to the Ukrainians, particularly that they've already taken. And it seems like it's more of a, as I understand it, a plan that would start from the current state of the battlefield and then negotiate from there. So it's just an interesting development. It'll be interesting to see how Ukraine plays it, because remember, the United States is apparently opposed to this plan, and of course, so since we're the biggest underwriter of the Ukrainian economy at this point, including their pension plans and a lot of financial things in addition to weapons, they can't really afford to go against what we want, I would not think. So this will be an interesting situation, what happens, because supposedly this also involves a phone conference with Zelensky, which as I mentioned previously in another video, as I understand, he's agreed to accept this phone call. Of course, I presume he's going to try to convince Xi into putting pressure on Russia to accept their terms. And so this will be just interesting to see what happens, and we'll be as the week goes on next week, we'll have to kind of get an idea where that's leading. By the way, I hope you can give me a like if you like these videos, and if you haven't subscribed yet, we sure need more subscribers. More the merrier. So anyway, so that's one aspect. The other aspect is the ongoing, refusal of the U.S. to provide F-16s, but I think actually the MiG-29s are probably more useful to Ukraine than the F-16s would be anyhow, because the MiG-29 is designed to operate from more of an austere field, rough field environment. And if you actually put aircraft on very well-known airfields that are well prepared, they're easy targets for cruise missile attacks. So I presume that Ukraine has been operating the planes they have, which are these Russian kind of rough field kind of planes like the MiG-29 and the Su-25, operating them from kind of, probably highway stretches and things like that, I assume. It's not, nobody's actually stated how they've been able to maintain air operations in spite of all the cruise missile attacks. But anyhow, and drones and everything else. And after all, Russia does have satellite reconnaissance as well, so they're not, they have capabilities that are way beyond what Ukraine would have indigenously. But of course, Ukraine has U.S. intelligence and NATO intelligence to guide their activities, and of course that's been critical. That's what led to the drone incident that we just went through, of course, because Russia wanted to obviously blind that operation. Although I understand now the United States has responded now by flying a Global Hawk, and the Global Hawk flies a lot higher than these Reapers do. So that'll be a lot more difficult for the Russians to deal with in the same way. They could deal with it with a S-400 surface-to-air missile, of course, but that would be a very overt act compared to the somewhat, I don't know what you want to call it, indirect, somewhat less direct action that was taken on the Reaper. I mean, simply blasting it out of the air with a missile would be a bit more provocative, is what I'm saying. So we'll see what happens with that, or whether this was a one-off thing anyhow, just to sort of, it may have been a purely tactical thing, as I mentioned, to just obscure one particular operation that was underway at that moment or something. So anyhow, so that's what's kind of on the agenda here, is to kind of see what the impact of China is having. I mean, their intervention between Iran and Saudi Arabia, that is also a troubling development, because, I mean, this kind of undermines this whole Abraham Accords thing that had been worked out previously under the Trump administration, and relationships between Israel and Saudi Arabia and several other Persian Gulf Arab states. And if now we're going to have a cooperation or a accommodation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, then the idea of any kind of a Israeli or U.S.-Israeli strike against the Iranian nuclear program is probably off the table. I mean, usually the thought was they'd fly through maybe northern Saudi Arabia to get there, or I guess they could fly over Jordan and then just blow through Iraq anyhow. That's hard to know. I mean, Iraq, of course, is equipped with U.S.-supplied F-16s, but I guess it looks to me like the environment that would allow that has probably been rolled back somewhat. Meanwhile, Israel has its own internal squabbles over their judicial reform proposal. And the Israeli left is really pushing back hard with a lot of street protests and reserve Air Force units refusing to train because of this. So it looks like that aspect of things is not likely to happen in the near term, which gives a green light to Iran getting their nuclear weapon, I guess, if they want it. So anyhow, that's another thing that's kind of on the agenda at the moment that we're kind of watching. And of course, as far as the war itself, I mean, in Ukraine, it's proceeding about like we've been saying all along. The Russians are advancing constantly and very slowly. It's not a blitzkrieg. It's kind of a street by street, block by block, field by field battle. So anyhow, that's kind of how that's playing out. And so anyhow, I'll be wrapping this up for now. Post this also on Rumble. And of course, the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below.